Okay, this is the meeting of the Medical Board of California, Panel A, and we're now in open session of the case of Dr. Lara. The panel members here have already introduced themselves previously, but I'll have them go around the room and then we'll introduce. The judge will then take over, ALJ will take over, and then we'll go from there. So to my left.
Dr. Randy Hawkins.
Judge Catherine Feinstein.
Dr. Ronald Lewis.
Dr. Felix Yip.
David Warmoth.
Thank you very much. Now I will turn the open session meeting over to the ALJ.
Good afternoon. We are on the record before the Medical Board of California, Panel A, in the matter of Dr. Adrienne Elizabeth Lara, Medical Board case number 16-2010-206514, OAH number 2016-110033. This is the date, time, and place set for oral argument in the notice of hearing for oral argument. My name is Heather Rowan. I'm an administrative law judge, and I have been assigned to preside over this hearing. Prior to opening this session today, we established that there is a quorum of the medical board panel, and they have each identified themselves. May I take the appearance of counsel, starting with the Attorney General, please?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Vladimir Shalkovich. I'm a Deputy Attorney General. I represent the complainant in this case, the Executive Director of the Medical Board.
Thank you. And for the respondent?
Your Honor, good afternoon. My name is Peter Bertling, and I represent Dr. Adrienne Lara, the respondent.
Thank you. Before we proceed today, we are recording instead of recording via audio rather than having a court reporter. Are the parties willing to stipulate that this meeting is recorded? For the Attorney General?
Yes, Your Honor, we do stipulate.
Thank you. And for respondent?
Yes, Your Honor, so stipulated.
Thank you. The matter today is the board's issuance of an order of non-adoption of a proposed decision by administrative law judge. The board has determined the board has decided to determine this matter itself. I understand that the parties are aware of the time frames. I will keep the time and give warnings a few minutes prior to the end of your time. As a reminder, the arguments are only based on the existing record. No additional evidence will be presented. Prior to beginning, if the Attorney General could give a brief overview of the matter. Yeah. Before you begin, I want to reflect for the record that Dr. Lara is present today with counsel. Thank you. Go ahead and proceed.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, this is a case that involves the quality of care that was delivered by Dr. Lara to 3 separate patients. The first patient, her initials are MT. She had a prior history of gestational diabetes and a C-section delivery, and Dr. Lara took care of her during her prenatal period. Dr. Lara at the time had no privileges to perform the second C-section that this patient needed at any hospital. And unbeknownst to this patient, she had no intention of delivering this baby personally. She was going to refer her out. The patient complained to the board because when her pregnancy became high risk, because of repeat instance of gestational diabetes and severe anxiety that led to panic attacks and a prescription of Ativan by Dr. Lara, unexpected to the patient, Dr. Lara discharged her from her practice. That's what led to the complaint in this case. The second patient, her initials are CK. She underwent liposuction of her inner thighs. She wanted to get what is known as a thigh gap in pop culture. What she did get from Dr. Lara was a deep disfiguring gash on her inner thigh, and so she complained to the board about it. The board's expert witness, Dr. Michael Schwartz from Pasadena, California, opined caused by overly aggressive liposuction technique, and that it was departure from the standard of care to have performed in this way. And so for that reason, the second case was a part of the accusation as well. The last patient, YC, was also a liposuction patient. She underwent liposuction of her outer thighs and flanks. She was unhappy with her results and complained to the medical board. She suffered also a contour deformity on her outer thighs. That's what brought about the complaint. The review of the care in that particular case, the opinion of the expert, medical board's expert, was that YC's deformity was not as severe as the other patient, CK, and although it wasn't perfect, it was within the universe of outcomes that could be expected. However, review of Dr. Lara's medical records led to charges in the accusation because the records were inaccurate and inadequate. That's the 3 patients that are subject of the accusation. The proposed decision that was prepared by Administrative Law Judge Carla Garrett is 41 pages, single space. It is an extremely detailed, well thought out.
Can I interrupt you? The overview of the case, I appreciate that. If you wanted to talk about the decision and your arguments, we can move on to that.
Very well. The only thing I wanted to point out to the board is that the proposed decision is very well written and that it is an accurate representation of what occurred at the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Now, I believe that, Counsel for Respondent, you have an opening argument prepared?
Yes, I understand that we have 15 minutes, Your Honor.
That's true.
And I would like to address the panel during that time. And also, I'd like to reserve a few moments of that time for Dr. Laura to directly address the panel, if that would be acceptable to you.
That is acceptable. I just want to remind both you and Dr. Lara that no new evidence or testimony will be admitted, but prior to her statement, I will swear her in.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen of the panel, thank you for the opportunity to address you directly about my client, Dr. Laura. And I appreciate this opportunity, and both Dr. Laura and I fully recognize the important role that you folks play in society in making certain that the public is protected and taken care of by the physicians in this community. It's one of the questions in my mind as I've read this case is the reason for non-adoption. We had a situation where at the hearing, Mr. Shalkovich represented to Judge Garrett that the board had authorized certain terms, including 3 years probation. Her decision was much more stringent than what Mr. Shalkovich represented the board had authorized. It included 5 years probation and a number of conditions. And as you mentioned a moment ago, Your Honor, the board has decided to take this as its own. And I was wondering, because I am somewhat at a loss, if the board could indicate to me whether there were some specific concerns that you wanted me to address so I don't waste my time on things that really are not germane or that are not your focus in this case. Or would you just prefer me to move forward?
I'm going to have to defer to the board on that.
I think it's more important just for me, I'll comment from other board members, is to just go ahead and move forward. Since we have the material we've already previously read.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. I'll do that. When we started out with this accusation, there were 4 allegations of extreme departures from the standard of care. By the time we even got to the hearing, the medical board expert, Dr. Feynman, made it clear that with regard to one of the accusations of extreme departures that he set forth in his report, he withdrew that opinion. The reason he withdrew that opinion, as set forth in the record, is he was provided with information and explanations that he didn't have because in the underlying investigation, that information wasn't obtained for whatever reason. So we started out with a situation where even before Judge Garrett was deciding what discipline to impose, all claims of extreme departures from the standard of care were withdrawn. And then the case focused primarily on 3 issues. The first issue, which Dr. Laura fully recognizes is a problem, and it became much more apparent to her as the hearing went forward, is she needs direction and some training on medical record keeping courses. If the board were to look at page 34 of Judge Garrett's decision, under her analysis, paragraph number 12, there are 8 areas where there are deviations or causes for discipline that are identified. And if you look at those 8 items, 5 of them deal with medical record keeping. For example, number 2, she says failure to adequately document the care and treatment. Number 5, failure to adequately document patient YC's liposuction procedure. Number 6, failure to document the operative note. Number 7, failure to add the saline solution and document that had been documented. And then number 8, failure to adequately document. So we recognize that that's a significant issue that the board should address. And the question is, what is the appropriate remediation for that? Because as we all recognize, the purpose here is not punishment. And I think that the recommendation that the board authorized Mr. Shalkovich to make, and that Judge Garrett did make, was that Dr. Laura take a medical record keeping course similar to the one at PACE that's offered here at the University of California, San Diego. So we have 5 instances where there were medical record keeping issues. Dr. Laura did not try to explain them away. She recognized that those were a problem, and she wants to do what's best for her in being remediated on that issue. The other 2 issues dealt with an obstetrical patient. And I do want the board to understand, as you consider your remediation from this point out, that Dr. Laura has made a very difficult decision for her to make. Mr. Shalkovich is right. She does not have hospital privileges at any of the hospitals in Ventura community. And she has made a difficult decision in that her joy as a physician has been an obstetrician, to bring babies into the world, to nurture parents through the prenatal care. And she is no longer practicing obstetrics. And she will no longer practice obstetrics. She has given that up as of a few months ago. So I would ask that the court and the members of the panel consider that as you look at what remediation is important. And the reason I bring that up as well is you're aware that before this accusation, Dr. Laura had been on 35 months of probation for 2 instances of obstetrical care. And those obstetrical issues dealt with a baby who was being delivered, and as the baby came out, it dropped into a chamber that was there, and that was one of the things that she agreed would be cause for discipline. The other one was when she was doing an emergency cesarean section and the scalpel hit the baby's forehead. Those were the 2 obstetrical bases for putting her on the 35 months probation in the past. And when Judge Garrett made her decision, she indicated at page 13, on paragraph 13 of page 34, that was great concern, a great concern to her, this prior discipline. So the prior discipline, which dealt with obstetrics, solely obstetrics, it didn't deal with medical record keeping. It didn't deal with liposuction issues. It dealt with those 2 instances that I've identified for you and which Judge Garrett has set forth in her decision. I would agree with Mr. Shelkovich that it is a well-reasoned decision. I think that she gives factually accurate information for the most part, and so that information is contained in there.
Sir, you have 3 minutes if you are reserving 5 minutes for Dr. Lara.
So what that leaves us with is it leaves us with a situation where we have a patient who had an adverse reaction from liposuction. And she didn't get the cosmetic result that was desirable to either her or Dr. Laura. And there seemed to be some belief that Dr. Laura didn't understand that it was over-resection of the fat and tissue that caused this undesirable cosmetic result. But that's really not what happened here. Dr. Laura fully understood that over-resection could cause this result. That is clear from the record. What she was trying to explain was that there were certain mitigating factors that could be done to improve that result, which the patient never had done. And she was just trying to explain that if those things would have been done, she might have had a much better cosmetic result. Dr. Laura fully understands that over-resection of fat and tissue can cause an abnormal or deformity. In fact, it's part of the informed consent that she provides to the patients when she's discussing the potential issues. So there really wasn't a lack of knowledge on her part. And the basis for the experts understanding that she thought that there was nothing wrong with her resection causing the problem actually came from a misinterpretation of the interview that she had with the medical board. And if you've had an opportunity to look at the record in this case, it took several times scheduling with Dr. Laura and the medical board to get that interview done, because this was at a time in Dr. Laura's life, as the record reflects, when she was being treated for stage 3 colon cancer, and maybe her answers during that interview didn't come out as articulately as she would have liked. So I don't think that there's really this concern, or there should be a concern, that she doesn't understand that over-resection can cause an adverse cosmetic deformity. And I would ask you to consider that. I think you would also, as you look at the record, the expert agreed that she left a centimeter of fat, which is an acceptable amount. That was not only documented in her records, it was clear from her testimony in that regard. So that's the basis for the discipline, the actual substantive malfeasance or simple departure in the standard of care in this case. And with that, I'm going to let Dr. Laura make a few comments.
Thank you. You have 5 minutes, Dr. Lara. I do, and if you could move the microphone over, that would be helpful.
Yeah. Is it all right if I stand while I address the board?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
As long as the microphone picks you up. Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony or statement you gave today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead and begin.
All right. First of all, thank you for coming today and sharing your time and your expertise. And thank you for the opportunity to speak for 5 minutes. During those 5 minutes, I want to share with you who I am, how I feel, and how sorry I am and how willing I am to remediate. All I ever wanted to be was a good doctor. Since I was 8 years old, I wanted to be a good doctor. In my culture and in my family, that wasn't going to be an easy road, and it wasn't. But I'm here 56 years later, and telling you that that's still what I strive to be, is a very good doctor. I believe that being a doctor is a great privilege and a great responsibility, and something I don't take lightly. I live my life every day grateful for the training and my knowledge and my skills in being a doctor and the ability to treat patients. I focus constantly on the well-being of a patient. on their healthcare status and the successful outcome of their healthcare and the safety of the patient, every one of my patients. I think if you knew me, you'd know that my love and concern for what I do for patients is reflected in my high standard of care, and also in the way that I practice and give back to my community and the thousands of families that I have helped. Being a doctor is my highest calling. The mistakes that you have before you, I don't take lightly. They're important, and I see them seriously. I should have documented specifics in the restrictions regarding Ativan and pregnancy. I should have documented that and been specific. I should have documented my calculations for lidocaine. I should have had more adequate medical records, and I'm sorry, and I know that. I regret that the 2 patients who were not satisfied with their outcome were not satisfied. I've actually spent hours reviewing and reflecting and studying and learning what else I could do better. I think that's what a doctor does. I think we never stop being a student, and we never stop learning. I do have to admit that I'm grateful for the over 2,000 cases, though, of patients that I've done liposuction on that have been grateful and have expressed satisfaction. In conclusion, being a doctor, again, is all I ever wanted to be, was being a good doctor. And I'll continue to strive to be that. This has been a very painful process for me, both personally and professionally. And I take it very seriously. I'm far from perfect. And I regret the mistakes that I've made. I want you to know that these are isolated errors and that they'll not happen again, nor do I feel that they reflect the standard of care that I practice by in my entire practice. I stand before you, humble and contrite, and willing to do what I need to do to remediate the problem. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Shelkovitz, you have 15 minutes.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. This case, ladies and gentlemen of the board, does present a situation where Dr. Lara has had prior discipline, and here she is facing discipline once again. At the very least, from looking at her prior discipline and looking at least a couple of the cases that we had here, there's a theme that develops in that harm to patients that unfortunately resulted in this pattern of cases doesn't have to do necessarily with Dr. Lara's knowledge base. It's the physical manual dexterity situation that tends to repeat itself. I kind of want to demonstrate this for you in terms of what I was talking about. The issues that led to prior discipline were as follows. In 2007, while Dr. Lara was performing a vaginal delivery at St. John's, the baby slipped through her hands and fell into the plastic bag used to collect blood and fluids from delivery, which was located under the mother's buttocks. The incident caused the detachment of the baby's umbilical cord. It's an unusual thing for a delivery physician who, they call it catching the baby, to drop the baby. And it kind of shows perhaps an issue with manual dexterity. In 2008, when Dr. Lara was delayed in delivering a breech baby at St. John's, again, she performed an emergency C-section, during which she cut the baby with her scalpel during delivery. Respondent also caused the separation of the uterine vessels of the mother, which led to massive bleeding and resulted in a urologist having to be called to place stents in the patient's uterus. It's a very painful injury and a very serious event, again, caused by a misguided scalpel in Dr. Lara's hands. So these incidents led to loss of privileges and eventually led to board discipline. and following which Dr. Lara had no admitting privileges at any hospital. She was placed on 35 months probation, which was completed in September of 2015. While she was on probation, the board received these 3 complaints that I mentioned to you before. Those 3 complaints were investigated. The investigations didn't complete until Dr. Lara's probation was over. So unfortunately, as soon as she was done with her probation, she was facing additional charges. During that probation, she was required to, and she did successfully complete a PACE course. She was also required to complete an education course of 40 additional CME hours for each year of probation aimed at correcting the problems in her practice that led to the original discipline. Dr. Lara has sold herself a little bit short when she was presenting, when Mr. Bertling was talking about her, when she was telling you about her history. Dr. Lara was a clinical instructor at Harvard Medical School. She was the lead or head resident in the OBGYN department of the teaching hospital there. Her problems are not going to be corrected by doing some studying and taking a few tests. She is a brilliant person who can pass a test without a problem. The problem that is evidenced in these 2 cases that happened before, and then the subsequent case of, actually 2 cases of patients who undergone liposuction, and their liposuction resulted in disfigurement. One of them was not so bad, but CK certainly was very bad enough for a plastic surgeon to find that there was a departure from the standard of care because of the massive amount of excessive resection by a cannula in Dr. Lara's hands. And so when I was giving my closing argument to the administrative law judge, I tried to point that out. In fact, we had an exchange with the ALJ during which I said, well, she already took the PACE class, the PACE course. She already passed it. There's no sense in sending Dr. Lara back to PACE once again because, again, her original PACE was the result of OBGYN. In this case, half of this case is OBGYN. And so she's just going to repeat the PACE course, pass it with flying colors. How is she going to get better as a result of it? And so I suggested to the ALJ that there were a couple of alternatives, maybe to order additional CME in the area of liposuction. It was known that Dr. Lara was transitioning from OBGYN over to aesthetic surgery during the hearing. I'm glad that her transition is moving forward, but in reality, here we have a person who, well, in a rarefied world of surgeons, seems to show less of a manual dexterity ability than others. And perhaps to bring her up in this situation, what she needs is not to take tests and read and regurgitate information. Perhaps what she needs is proctoring. Perhaps that is the area that the board was concerned about at the time when the non-adoption was ordered. So focusing on discipline, which is what you asked me to do and Mr. Bertling to do during our closing, during your non-adoption order, I believe that what was asked of Judge Garrett, what I asked of Judge Garrett, fully understanding that bulk of the case was record keeping, but that there were these issues out there, what I asked for was within the board's guidelines as far as remedial safety modalities, if you will, that are available to the board to order in this case. Because after all, what you are here for is to make sure that Dr. Lara's patients, future patients, are protected before the harm to them occurs. And as Dr. Lara indicated to you, she wants to get better. And in reality, the length of probation in and of itself is secondary. These protective conditions are what is the key to this case. So that is the argument directed at penalty. I believe that Judge Garrett did a very good job analyzing the case. I believe that her order of probation and the remedial conditions that she ordered were within the board's guidelines. If the board thought to non-adopt because of the fact that Dr. Lara was previously on probation, and here she is coming back again showing additional problems, I think that the first probationary order perhaps did not address the specific kernel of the problem that you now have a chance to address following this non-adoption. I would urge you to consider ordering a proctoring condition for Dr. Lara. Otherwise, I believe that Judge Garrett did a very good job in both analyzing the case, and I think she was very thoughtful and appropriately made a recommendation with regard to the discipline, which is within the board's purview and discretion. I could go on and tell you about the specific niceties of how the hearing went, but I believe it's set forth in the proposed decision. I know you all have read it. If you have any questions, I would be very happy to answer them. Otherwise, I will submit at this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ask them at the end
Before the closing?
before the close. Yeah, we usually ask them when they're both done, and we ask if they have a chance now to rebut. We would do it after.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I just wanted to clarify the procedure today. Mr. Bergman, you have 5 minutes for close if you'd like.
Certainly, I would just like to address some of the comments made by Mr. Shalkovich. I don't think this is a case where proctoring would make a difference, where Dr. Laura would learn anything new or her skill set would improve. The three cases we're dealing with are unique and distinct. It doesn't happen very often that a baby comes out with such expulsive force that it slips through the doctor's hand. It didn't drop to the floor. It dropped a few inches into an area that was right there. And while the baby wasn't injured, Dr. Laura brought it to everybody's attention. The pediatrician was notified. I don't think all the proctoring in the world could deal with that specific issue. The other was a situation, it was an emergency cesarean section to save the baby's life. She was operating extremely quickly to save the baby's life, and the baby had a rent on the forehead because of the scalpel. I don't think all the proctoring in the world is going to change that or give her more knowledge on how to do a cesarean section, the techniques that should be taken under those circumstances. We have two cases of liposuction. One of them, the expert admitted, after having looked at the records, that while the result wasn't appropriate or the best, there was no criticism regarding her technique, her knowledge about how to do liposuction, or the fact that she understood what the complications of liposuction were. I don't see how proctoring would help in that circumstance either. In the other case, where it was documented in her notes, as the expert recognized, that she says in her notes, here's what I am doing. I am checking to make certain that there's the inch of fat that should remain. These are things that proctoring aren't going to change. The proctor can't even visualize that, and the result from a cosmetic procedure like that doesn't even become apparent for several days after the fact. So having a proctor there to see whether she's holding the cannula correctly or whether she's pinching enough for skin, I don't think is going to really make any difference in these circumstances, particularly when you look at the fact that she has performed thousands of liposuction procedures where the result is favorable and the patient is pleased. So I don't think proctoring would be one of those things that would protect the public or be necessary to remediate Dr. Laura. I do recognize, and as Mr. Shalkovich pointed out, during the first discipline, 35 months of probation, there were no questions regarding Dr. Laura's medical record keeping. There was no discipline posed about medical record keeping. I think it would be entirely appropriate for that to happen under the circumstances of this case, because really the question is, what does she need to remediate? I appreciate Mr. Shalkovich's recognition that she is a well-trained physician, that she understands that she went through PACE with flying colors, with no remediation made after she goes through the week program there, with no recommendations for any kind of further training, because she does dedicate herself to not only learn through things like that, but continuing education, regardless of whether it's imposed by any board.
You have 1 minute.
So that's the final thing that I want you to understand with regard to this liposuction case. Dr. Schwartz said he found there was a deviation, a simple deviation, because he considered three factors together. Number one, she referred to liposuction as a procedure, not surgery, and he thought she was downplaying the importance of liposuction procedures. Dr. Garrett didn't recognize or believe that. And then when it came to the issue of over-resection, he admitted that the fact that she left a centimeter behind of fat and tissue was within standards of practice and appropriate. And with that, I'll submit. I welcome any questions that the panel might have.
Thank you.
I do have one point with regard to what Mr. Bertling said. I don't think it'll take me the entire 5 minutes.
Well, I don't know that he gets 5 minutes.
My notes say he gets 5 minutes.
Does he? Okay.
Oops, sorry.
All right, I apologize.
Okay, and
I'll start you off and we'll see how it goes.
okay, so with regard to this issue of 1 inch of fat, Dr. Lara described in her surgical report that as she was suctioning the patient's inner thigh, that she kept her hand in the area and making sure that some fat was left over. Subsequently, it was determined that 1 centimeter, not inch, of fat remained in the patient. Dr. Schwartz explained the reason why you need 1 centimeter of fat at least is because it would prevent the skin from adhering to the muscle underneath the fat. And if you have these adhesions, it would have been an extreme departure from the standard of care, leaving that 1 centimeter of fat in place, leaving that 1 centimeter of fat in place kept it from being an extreme departure from the standard of care, but for an aesthetic procedure, it was outside of the standard of care. That was Dr. Schwartz's testimony. And those were the findings by ALJ Garrett. So with regard to that particular patient, another thing that Mr. Bertling pointed out was that Dr. Lara was fully understood that it was that the patient's deformity was caused by overly aggressive amputation of fat. But in truth, if you would look at the record, at the transcript of Dr. Lara's testimony to the medical board during her subject interview. What she was doing wasn't being forthcoming. She was being coy. She said, well, you know, I don't know if it was liposuction. I don't know if it was because she didn't take Motrin. I don't know if she was non-compliant. And in fact, during the hearing, Dr. Lara had based her defense to this liposuction case on the issue of the patient being non-compliant. And when the situation was analyzed, it turns out that the patient was perfectly compliant, and in fact, the patient came to all of the critical follow-up appointments, and the one appointment that was missed, and which resulted in a 6-week almost window of the patient not being followed, wasn't because the patient didn't come to the appointment, it was because Dr. Lara didn't come to that appointment. The patient was there looking for her, but she wasn't there. So the bottom line is, I believe that this suggestion that I made for the board to reconsider the proposed decision, I think the board would be well within its discretion to consider proctoring. And I believe, once again, that the proposed decision by Judge Garrett is a very good decision, and I would recommend to the board to adhere to it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does the board have questions? Let's start with my farthest left. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So Dr. Lara, can you tell us what is your motivation for offering to limit your practice going forward to gynecology alone? Why are you offering that?
For one thing, it has to do with the fact that I don't have privileges at a hospital right now. I had a call group that was doing all of my deliveries, and I'd call groups at the various hospitals of my colleagues. And right now, it's better for me not to do obstetrics because I can't offer that delivery to them of myself. And the other thing is because of my health.
I'm going to interject, because we don't have a court reporter here. If you could say your name before you speak, I think it will help the transcription later on. Thanks.
So that was Dr. Hawkins asking the question. So as I read the case regarding the obstetric case, it appeared that you actually had adequate coverage, a system set up to take care of the patients.
Yes, sir.
So is it primarily your personal health, or do you really have concerns about your ability to actually care for these patients on a cognitive nature?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. No, it's more of my personal health and the schedule that obstetrics incurs, which would be hard on me physically.
That's helpful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Questions? Yes, sir.
Dr. Lara, I have a question about after liposuction. What instructions do you give the patient? It says on, but sorry, this is Dr. Lewis. After liposuction, what instructions do you give the patients after liposuction, and how are they given to the patient? And then after that, what kind of follow-up by yourself or staff ensures that the patient is complying with the instructions, such as abdominal binders and whatnot? So I'd like to hear about your process.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis, for your question. First of all, I see my patient. No one else but myself as the doctor sees the patient. The patient is seen. I'll take you through the process because it's pretty self-explanatory, and you'll see how thorough I believe it is. We see a patient initially for a consult to talk to the patient about whether or not, and assess them as to whether or not they're a good candidate. I take very, very low-risk patients, so no secondary morbidities are accepted. Healthy lifestyle is accepted, and healthy medical background. So once they've been assessed to be a candidate for liposuction, then I have them come in for a repeat visit, which is called the preoperative visit. At the preoperative visit, as we did in the consult, we discussed the procedure, the risks, the benefits, and the technique. But we're a little bit more detailed at the preoperative visit because that's where we give them a packet, which includes a consent form, registration form, pre- and post-op instructions, medications, catalogs for their garments, and also I sit personally with them and go through the entire technique of the procedure and what they can expect. At that appointment, they're given a prescription for Motrin, which is an anti-inflammatory, as you know. They're given a prescription for a narcotic for excessive pain, and even though the medical literature doesn't support it, they're given a prescription for Keflex or cephalosporin to prevent, as a preventative measure for infection. The usual infection rate in liposuction is about 1 in 1,000, and knock on wood, we're running pretty well with that too. So even though the medical literature doesn't support it in my practice, because of wanting to negate risks, I give them that. Then the third appointment is when they actually come in for their procedure. In the procedure in the morning, we do another informed consent. So we go over the entire consent form again and go over the risk, benefits, and technique of the procedure. And on that day, they're given another information sheet that says what the immediate post-op care is, not the long-term care of garments or taking Motrin, but what to do exactly that night. In addition, after the procedure or before the procedure, I give every patient or their loved one, their person that they're with, I give them my cell phone number. And I tell them very openly to text me, that there's no silly or no dumb question. I've even been asked whether or not you can have a tuna sandwich after lipo, so not to be afraid of asking anything. So often my patients will text me that night with their questions. I don't want them to feel alone. Then their post-op care is as such. If they have a procedure, I see that patient within 3 days after the procedure. So I want to see how they're doing, investigate the sites, and see how they're doing, give them advice. At those appointments, I can do various things besides advise them about the care of their site. I can also see how they're wearing the garment, how is the garment fitting, how do the actual port sites look. So the routine for seeing a doctor or patient, Dr. Lewis, after the case is I see them within 1 to 3 days. I see them in 1 week after the procedure, and then I see them at 2, 4, and 6 weeks, which with my research has shown to be far more detailed than any other post-op care for liposuction I've seen. But I talk to my patients about this being a work in progress, that the post-op care is really important to the outcome. And not only is the post-op care important to the outcome, but I want to be very seriously involved with how the results might come about and what different things they can do during that post-op period to affect the end results, including things like lipofoam, massage, lymph drainage, elevation, different garments.
Yeah,
I hope
think
that answers your question.
Yes, it does. But one of your patients made a statement that she did not see you for 6 weeks afterwards, which is inconsistent with your post-op plan, from what I'm hearing. She saw you, never came in for a follow-up visit until 6th week following her first follow-up appointment, when she was supposed to return 1 week following the June 22nd appointment.
Right, that was CK, and that was the one that Mr. Salkovich was referring to.
Did not come in.
Yeah, that was, there was a couple of instances. We saw her for 1 appointment afterwards, after her case. Apparently, she came in for another appointment, and because she was coming from Marina Del Rey, which was a period of about an hour's length from my office, we had agreed to see her on a Saturday morning. I had not been informed by my staff they had scheduled her for Saturday, and I wasn't there for that appointment. We then followed up with the patient to make follow-up visits, and she was non-compliant to those visits. So
Okay.
she didn't see me. So that was the whole, as you know, from medicine, the 6-op post-op period during which inflammation is the highest and the most amount of healing is done.
Okay, thank you. Another question along those same lines
Yes.
with the liposuction is your training. I see Bella Med Spa 2013
Yes.
in Phoenix. Is that recognizable training?
Yeah.
Certified? I don't know.
I
about
didn't
that?
either till I did a lot of research, and I did about 3.5 years research before going into any liposuction, before even buying the machine, let alone involving myself in the care of liposuction and the procedure or surgery of liposuction. There is no real certification. There's different courseworks that you can do. This one was offered by the people who sold me the machine. And so it's a doctor who is a plastics or cosmetic specialist in Phoenix who works specifically with the type of machine that I bought, which is the kind of machine that has had the least amount or has had no FDA complaints like some of the other machines. It's out of Europe, and it uses a vibration or a very non-threatening, non-invasive sort of technique for creating good adherence and a creation of collagen. So anyway, so I went to the specific doctor who used the specific machine to train me on the specific technique.
Good. You made a statement about, I think you made a statement about giving up a practice, giving up OB/GYN. You know, when you get a license, state of California, you're licensed to practice all forms of medicine.
Right.
It depends on the hospital and the privilege and stuff. So, you know, you could give up OB/GYN today, and tomorrow you could say, you know, I didn't want to give it up. So just to let you know that, I mean, we hear these statements, but having a license, unless we place certain restrictions on it with whether it's proctoring or whether it's limitations in types of procedures, you can go out there and practice. So not that you need, understand? By saying
Let me
giving
see if
up
I understand,
OB/GYN,
Dr. Luce. Are you suggesting that the fact that I've said that I've given up OB, that I might just be saying that to the board to appease them?
what I'm
or-
saying is what the law says, that you could still do it. So we have to take all that into consideration.
I have no plan to do it, and I would hope that,
I hear you, and I hear what you're saying. I'm just making a statement for you, is that you could later on.
are you suggesting that the board might
I'm not
make it-
suggesting anything, Dr. Laura. I'm just saying, making a statement about the law, just to be aware
Okay.
of the law. Okay?
I have no intention of ever practicing OB
Okay,
again.
let's,
Okay.
I think you're both on the same page. Do you have
Yes,
another
yes.
question?
And one more question for the District Attorney General. You talked about manual dexterity, that she doesn't have manual dexterity, and I'm just going to throw this out there, whether you answer or not, it's fine. Have you ever delivered a baby?
No, have not. I did watch 3 of them before.
Thank you, Dr. Laura.
I have no further questions after that. Thank you very much.
Dr. Yip? If you could state your name, please.
I was going to. Dr. Felix Yip. Dr. Laura, you mentioned you have done 2,000 liposuction
Yeah, a little
Since-
over 2,000, Dr. Yep.
since 2013.
Yes.
So was that
N-
5
No,
years?
that's since I've done them for the last 5.5 years.
Are they mostly below the waist or the whole
Actually,
body?
actually, an entire variety, probably from starting from the neck down, from chin to, I've done buffalo humps on patients, and further down all the way to ankles, yeah.
You do IV sedation in the office?
No, my form of sedation is I do an oral sedation, and then I do anesthetic using the tumescent solution with lidocaine. I was trained in the 90s in Boston when minimally invasive surgery became in vogue. We were doing a lot of surgeries in our office at the time, so I adopted the practices from Harvard to my practice here for how I conduct the surgery.
And your staff are trained as well as CPR and all that?
Yes, and we have the inhalants, we have the aspirin, we have the emergency carts, yeah.
And when was the last time you attended a course as well as liposuction, trying to like improve your skill? Or since the incidents you mentioned that you research several hours, read the books, have you thought about going back certain courses or certain specialists in order to refine your skills?
Thank you for asking. Yes, I have. What I did do was go back and reread Dr. Klein's. He's considered the inventor of tumescent liposuction, and went back and read Dr. Klein's textbook, and have considered going back to his course. I haven't done it yet, in true honesty, but I think that probably at this point, to just kind of enhance my skills that I already have just based on numbers, that it would probably be wise to do something like that. Thank you for asking.
Mr. Wormuth, any questions?
No questions.
Anyone else from the panel?
Your Honor, can I just make one comment?
Yeah, could you please speak into the microphone?
Certainly. This is Peter Bertling. Dr. Lewis, I appreciated the point that you made about how a license allows you to do everything. And if it is a concern, I think it would be entirely appropriate for this panel to include as part of the discipline order that Dr. Laura be precluded from practicing obstetrics.
Thank you. If there's nothing further, then this matter will be submitted if the AG agrees, sir,
Yes, Your Honor.
and on behalf of the respondent.
Yes, Your Honor.
This matter is submitted, the record is closed, and we are now off the record.